discuss about data and variables. Very interesting topic and sometimes a little confusing topic. Every time I come across data, I go back to my early college days where I was studying about computer science. In computer science, we deal with a lot of data. In fact, in the first class itself, you will be taught about what is data, what are variables, etc. But nevertheless, uh, as a researcher, we'll see, irrespective of what subject area we are from, as a researcher, we'll try to understand the importance of data and variables and how we have to collect them, how we have to measure them, how many varieties of uh, variables are there, etc. As we know, data is very valuable. So data is generally collected if it is purposeful, like if you have a specific reason why you are collecting the data, it is usually called primary data. But if data is collected without a specific objective, but you are trying to use that data in whatever way that is possible in the future. At this point of time, when data is being collected, they don't know. They don't probably have an objective. But at a later point of time, they will probably use that data pieces in part and parcel for different purposes. So that is called a secondary data. So if you are, for example, you have a specific research problem and you are collecting data by doing interview or by using a some survey or questionnaire or something. So that is primary because you have a question, research question, you are targeting your audience and you are capturing certain data that you want to observe, right? But if, for example, the government of a country, they do census every 10 years, right? They count every head and they take a lot of variables, demographic variables, socio-economic variables, etc. They collect the data about the information about the people in the country, everyone in the country. When census is conducted, they don't have a specific objective. They have some fields, they have some form. They just want to collect and put the data into that. Later, economists, these policymakers, these regulators, the government departments, etc., each of them are interested in a different part of the data. They'll probably use it at a later point of time. The point I want to make here is data is very valuable and it all depends on how you use it. Okay. In order to not capture too much of data, because generally when you ask for data, if you are asking certain information, private information, or about a personal information about a person, he might be reluctant beyond a certain point to share with you. So you should ask specific questions and capture what you really wanted. You don't want to ask something absurd or not related to your research work. But this is an important consideration. So if the problem is not there, you can definitely collect a lot of data and you decide what part of the data is to be used, etc. Basically, data is organized and it is collected under what are heads called variables. So as you can see on the right side, I have a small Excel file, a small spreadsheet kind of a file. This is not even a spreadsheet or an Excel file. It is a screenshot from SPSS. Okay. So SPSS, as we know, is a statistical software for our data analysis. Okay. So here data is available. 1, 2, 3, some numbers are there. Okay. These are values. Okay. This is data. All these data is organized and are collected under variables. What are they under? What is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? These are numbers for or denoting subject. Okay, so subject is the variable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are the values under subject at various instances. And collectively, 1 to 7 is the data. Collectively. Okay. Similarly, height. Height is a variable. So 1.78, 1.82, 1.6, these are the values that come under height. Similarly, we have weight as a variable, and we have data that is collected under weight. So we have three variables in this example: subject, height, weight. Okay, and the numbers that you see here, this is organized by a specific way. For example, I want to say that one is person number one. By the way, subject here is not a subject as in our school curriculum, but subject here is like a patient in a psychology study. Okay, subject is like employee ID, for example, right? In psychology we call them as subjects basically. Okay, so what is variable here, or what are the characteristics of a variable here? A variable is a characteristic or a factor that can be measured. As you can see, we are able to measure. For example, measurement. For example, if you take the first subject or the first patient, the height of the first patient is 1.78, while the height of the second patient is 1.82. So I'm able to measure. I'm able to compare. I can able to observe what is the height of the person, what is the weight of the person, etc. Right? Sometimes I want to make some intervention techniques. For example, I assume that this person whose weight is 95 is overweight. Okay. And as a psychologist or maybe as a medical practitioner, I want to propose a treatment or an intervention, or I want to suggest him something because he came to me asking for suggestions to reduce his weight or how to cut weight is what he's looking for. So that means these values could be manipulated. So the values under a variable keep changing. They are not fixed all the time. But at a given point of time, this is what we have. Okay, I asked the person, I asked all the 7 subjects, all the 7 people to come back next year. And I again measured their height and weight. Their height and weight 1 year or 1 month down the lane would be different. So variables are those whose values keep changing. Okay, in this case, the values for first person and the second person could be different. Or the values for the first person now compared to that of next month or next year would be different. Right? Variable, as the phrase itself says, is one which changes, is one which varies. Now, the opposite of variable is a constant. Okay. For example, I ask you, in which country are you born? You say, I'm born in India. Right? You cannot change your country of birth at a later point of time. Because once you're born, the place where you're born, it is frozen. It could be a part of a different country or something like that later for geographical reasons, but generally speaking, that doesn't change. So constant is one whose value doesn't change. Variable is one whose value changes from one subject to the other subject, from one record to another record, from one moment to another moment of time, etc. Okay. For example, age is a variable, a very commonly used variable in research. Age is a variable. Gender is a constant. Right? Once your gender is determined, once your gender is framed, you generally don't change the gender. It's impossible, kind of, right? So age is a variable, gender is a constant, right? So when you're thinking about research problems, think about what things change. So those things could become your variables in your research project, and find out what doesn't change. Those things become constants. Okay. So my small assignment for you would be that just sit for some time, just introspect. What is my research problem? What am I doing in my PhD? What variables should I be using to ask or to capture from people or from some sources? What parts of those data doesn't change? What are the constants involved in that study? Right? This kind of curiosity is very important. You discuss with your friends also, right? So when you're discussing with your friends, knowingly or unknowingly, your friends would give you new ideas about variables. For example, I talk with an economist, a person from economics. I come from finance. My co-author is from economics. The moment I am discussing about certain variables with her, she is thinking from economics perspective while I was talking from a finance perspective. By conversation, but with discussion, she can give me ideas, and that can probably give me some broader way of looking at things, which I might not have perceived because of my focus to study. Right? So always discuss about your research work with as many people as possible. Don't think that is a very knowledgeable person and that this person is not having any knowledge. He's a very small fellow. What does he know? Don't think about it like that. In fact, in some of the research work, every day I go for a walk and I take my son or my daughter every day with the walk. I try to explain what I'm doing. So I tell this is what I have done today. This is my accomplishment. This is the problem that I've encountered, etc. in research work. And sometimes they ask me some kind of questions which I have not imagined also, and those are my new ideas. I can after coming back home, I will be with so much of energy that I want to include that dimension altogether. And who knows, that can turn into a research paper, right? There is an instance where in my own PhD case, while I'm talking about marketing and finance, unintentionally I brought in an economic dimension to it. But my supervisor said, you are including so many subject areas, it becomes a controversy. It should not be so broaded. Research should be more focused. It should not be broaded. So I was able to quickly chop out all those parts and make it into a research paper. Many people struggle to write research papers because they are writing paper for the sake of writing. what I would suggest you is do your research as a part of your thesis study and try to be as broad as possible. Obviously, everyone will stop you from being too broad. Whatever chopped parts are there, that itself is a research paper later. It could be a research publication. But the problem is you have to do it early. If you do the research writing part in the last year or maybe penultimate year or something like that, it leads to lots of troubles. So start writing from now onwards, and whatever extras coming, they can be chopped out. And that is how you can definitely write one paper a year. Now, another problem that I've come across is that when I'm in computer science, I was told about variables. So far so good. But when I came to research, when I'm studying my masters and I had this research methodology subject, there are so many variables. With great difficulty, I was able to understand something called dependent and independent variable. This itself became a miracle kind of. So with some difficulty, I was able to understand it, what is dependent and independent variable. That was sufficient enough for my research work at that point of time. But later, when I'm going to conferences and hearing to other conversation, their work is said to be statistically rigorous. And they're using models which are latest compared to my research work. And whatever they are talking, after a certain threshold, I was not able to follow them. They are using these terms called predictor variables, antecedent variables. Of course, qualitative variables and quantitative variables should be relatively at least connectable. But some people who are doing those SEM, using PLS, partial least square methods, confirmatory factor analysis, all those latest statistical tests, they are using this word called explanatory variables, response variables, etc. The subject of variable is very simple, but the usage, the perspective of their usage, etc., would probably be a little different. So we need to put an ear about basic differences between these things in the initial stage. And later, of course, when we talk about statistical tools and about SCM and PLS, we will probably discuss in detail about what is an explanatory variable, etc. For now, what is meant by dependent variable? What is meant by independent variable? This kind of broader understanding is sufficient for us. This is very important, by the way, because now, earlier, if you have really done your assignment, I asked you to write the names of variables, right? So you prepare your names of variables and constants, go to your supervisor. Now supervisor will ask you, okay, you have 20 variables here you want to collect. Fine. Out of these 20, what are dependent variables and what are independent variables? So separate them is what he says. Now you'll be back to square one because you don't know what is dependent variable or independent variable. This is exactly my situation also when I went to my supervisor 2.5 years afterwards of my research work. Because early days I'm working on literature review, doing some statistical tests, quickly preparing a questionnaire and then trying to collect the data, etc. That was my focus. Basically, in the early years of research, we don't have a proper plan or thought process because no one teaches all these things for us. But later, when she asked me what is dependent variable and independent variable, I took some time off, said, as ma'am, I'll come back tomorrow. So I came back home. Overnight, crazily, I saw so many videos related to dependent and independent variables. Then tomorrow, I am better prepared. Right? So this is what happens for every one of us. When we are learning something new, you might want to, people ask you questions and you don't know how to answer them. But you see, you have conducted the research in that. And then you have to do some homework to support those statements. That's a good thing. You're basically learning. Learning is always a good thing. Okay. And acknowledging what you know and what you don't know is itself a very good thing. So so don't feel bad or sad that despite having so many years of experience, I don't know what is a dependent variable. That is okay. That's fine.